Now let's get back to the ongoing turmoil for Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party as their election campaign continues to spectacularly unravel. The two parliamentary candidates and the party's director of campaigning are being investigated for allegedly betting on the date of the general election. Now, all this comes just a day after new polling suggested that the Tories are heading for electoral oblivion, with one MRP poll even suggesting that Rishi Sunak himself, the Prime Minister, could even lose his seat. Well, I'm joined in the studio by our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, it's an astonishing state of affairs that there's no analysis whatsoever of anything Sir Keir Starmer is saying on taxation, on housing, you name it. Instead, once again, we're just focused on the latest spectacular incident of the Conservatives shooting themselves in the foot, this time over gambling.
These silly mistakes are what the Tories could not afford to do when they called the election, being 20 points behind in the polls, but they keep repeating them. The early leaving of D-Day was a big issue and remains so, I think, on the doorstep. Now you've got this problem here with individuals gambling on the date of the general election. We knew about Craig Williams. He's a former parliamentary private secretary to Rishi Sunak in the last parliament. He's apologised. He had a flutter. He calls it himself a huge error of judgment. Now a second Tory candidate, Williams, is standing again. A second Tory candidate, Laura Saunders, the candidate in Bristol North West. She's reportedly has been investigated, we think, about maybe gambling on the date of the election. She's married to the director of the entire campaign, Tony Lee. Tony Lee himself has taken a leave of absence, we're told, by the Tory party today. Both, we think, are reported as being investigated by the Gambling Commission. A Tory spokesman says to us today, we've been contacted by the Gambling Commission, the regulator, about a small number of individuals. We don't know how many. Michael Gove doesn't know if it's more than two or more. He's been on the morning round today. We've heard also about a close protection officer for Rishi Sunak arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office, allegedly about the time of the election. This is all self-induced problems by the Tory party they can ill afford. Not surprisingly, the opponents of the Tory party, Rishi Sunak's opponents for Prime Minister, are loving it. Here's Sir Keir Starmer.
This candidate should be suspended, and it's very telling that Rishi Sunak has not already done that. If it was one of my candidates, they'd be gone and their feet would not have touched the floor. There's a wider point here that you touch on, which is we've now had 14 years of chaos, of division, of politics being about self-entitlement. And politics needs to be about service, about public service.
Sir Keir Starmer there saying it should be about service, not self-entitlement. Ed Davey, he's leader of the Lib Dems. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's quite awful. The idea that you bet on something but you know the result, that is immoral, it is illegal, and I can't believe people at the top of the Conservative Party are doing this and have allowed this to happen. This is corruption, frankly, and it needs to have a heavy hand from the top.
As you say, Martin, we're not talking about Lib Dem policies or Labour policy or grilling them on either what they might do if they get anywhere near the leavers of the party. We're talking about a problem in the Tory party about betting, which apparently, allegedly betting on the date of the general election. Now, Michael Gove, not a candidate in the election, in fact, standing down as Housing Secretary in 2 weeks' time. He's a sport. He's out there fighting for his old party, even though he's got no skin in the game anymore. He found himself being challenged not only about the polls, the dreadful polls we heard yesterday from Savanta, the Tories down to 53 points, 53 MPs from 365, Labour up to 516 MPs, again a snapshot from in this mega poll. He's been challenged today, but first of all he answered questions to me about the poll.
The polls, and it's just a snapshot, show us slightly further behind than that, but I'm convinced that as the arguments are heard by GB News voters, as they have a chance to reflect on what life would be like under Keir Starmer, with taxes higher, with risks to our national security, I believe that more people will decide that it would be completely wrong to hand Keir Starmer a blank cheque, and they will vote Conservative.
There's an emerging betting scandal about the Tory party on the date of the election. Two candidates are allegedly being looked at by the Gambling Commission. A third individual in the party HQ is withdrawn from frontline duties in terms of organising the campaign. Is your party corrupt?
No. It is the case that obviously any decision by anyone to use inside information to bet on the election date, that is wrong. Deeply regrettable, but I think the individuals concerned are now being investigated, and until that process is concluded, I think it's difficult for me to say more because you've got to respect the integrity of the investigation.
Well, I'm also joined in the studio now by the former Labour MP, Shan Simon. Shan, you were looking at all of that with a look of glee in your eyes. You can't believe your look. I mean, there's no scrutiny whatsoever of anything Sir Keir Starmer is throwing out there. We're simply talking about debacle after debacle, scandal after scandal. What on earth is going on? You guys must be loving it.
Well, you can see Keir Starmer and Ed Davey, you can see that they really are loving it. Well, to be honest, they're hamming it up a bit, aren't they? They're to listen to them talk, you'd think this was the worst and most serious thing that had ever happened in the world. I mean, it's a long way from the worst thing that the Conservatives have done in the last 14 years. Clearly, if people have broken the law, then that needs to be investigated and the law needs to take its course. But, a little bit of dodgy betting. Actually, if we weren't in the middle of a general election campaign, I wonder how much people would care. Yeah,
but Shan, a great point that Chris Hope came up with earlier is that there was activity, sure signs that the Labour Party actually saw this increase in betting and it may have tipped them off.
That's right. We're seeing reporting from Jim Waterson at The Guardian today. He's looked at the Betfair markets. That's one of the many firms you can bet with. He has found there was a big surge in betting on the July date for the election. On the day before, it was called by Rishi Sunak on the 22nd, I think it was, of May. So a big surge on the 21st of May. There's always been bets here and there. It's what's called a novelty market in the betting world. But the scale of that jump in bets, again, thousands of pounds and probably a few hundred here and there by people, just shows that someone knew something and people were getting rich, it seems, on quite an accurate bet about the date of the election.
And the amount of money, it's ran about just shy of £6,000, but it's a big jump. I don't know if we've got that graphic we can show. It just jumps right up the day before the election, which does suggest that this is bigger than just a couple of people betting. This seems to be more widespread. And also, Chris Hope, you had that information that the Labour Party strategic analysts saw this and
That's
it
right.
tipped them off that they saw the election campaign itself coming.
Just briefly on that, Martin, because the date of the election is a surprise and that's why you hold that back if you're the PM, because then you can surprise your opponents. And it did alarm Nigel Farage, who said, I can't stand this too quick, and it spooked the opponents. But Gabriel Pogrund, who's a well-regarded journalist at Sunday Times, he's saying that Morgan McSweeney, who's this official driving the strategy for Keir Starmer, noticed a jump in the betting markets for a July poll, and that tipped Labour off that the election announcement was coming. So it's not only a bad look, but it actually damaged the advantage the Tories had at the beginning by tipping off Labour.
And so Sean, when we look at it in that context, it's not just a few quid being fluttered on election day. If it's tipping off your opponent, so you lose the element of surprise, and if it's even bigger, it hands your media opponents at The Guardian yet more sticks to beat you with. This scandal seems to be getting bigger and bigger.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm not saying there are no consequences. Absolutely, it should never have happened. What it really shows me, though, just like so much across the rest of this campaign, is that their minds are just not on it, are they? Like these Tories, they're on the beach, they're somewhere else. Even when you look at Rishi Sunak, he looks like a man who knows that he's lost. You can't tell whether he's going to burst into tears or start shouting at somebody, but he doesn't look like a prime minister normally looks on the campaign trail.
I mean, I've been with him quite a lot in close quarters in my job covering the campaign for the GB News. He is keen and enthusiastic and bouncy, and wants to convince. He knows his lines. He's getting them out there. I think when you see him close to, you think, well, he is believing himself. I wonder whether he's reading the runes though in the polls and despairing, but we don't get that impression with him.
And what do you think about the lack of strong-arm discipline? We spoke to Caroline Slowcock earlier on. She's a former private secretary to Downing Street to Maggie Thatcher, and echoing actually what Sir Keir Starmer said. She said in Maggie's day, these people, they'd have been booted straight out. Sir Keir Starmer said today they'd be straight out before their feet touched the ground. So it's a further test of Rishi Sunak's premiership, if he's seen to go soft, if he's seen not to act. But again, it's just a pointless and a needless distraction, isn't it, all of this?
It's been like this for 2 years now, hasn't it? The Tory party's been at war with itself. There's been no discipline. It's been, to be fair to Rishi Sunak, it's been impossible for him to impose discipline on such a fractured party. And now that they see the government coming to an end, it's absolute chaos and it's every man and woman for themselves and just do whatever they feel like.
Sean, you were a Labour MP from 2001 to 2010, the back end of those two big majorities for the Labour Party. The Tories are warning about the dangers of a mega majority, a super majority from the Labour Party. Is that a worry? I mean, or is there an arrogance in government when you have so many MPs and there's no opposition, you can do what you like?
I'm not worried about that. For one thing, I don't believe the polls that say that Labour will have 550 MPs or whatever. It seems very likely they'll have a comfortable majority, but it's not going to be double the Blair majority. Our system just doesn't work like that. But the real danger is when governments are in power for too long and they become complacent. And they run out of steam and they run out of the discipline that we were talking about. I'm afraid that happens to all governments in power over time.
Well, Michael Gove today, though, was saying that we're in danger of a forever government, and that is because Sir Keir Starmer plans to get in, lower the voting age to 16. Intimations of cooking the books, ensuring that young people vote for the Labour Party. That supermajority could drag on forever. Is that really healthy for democracy?
Well, under the Conservatives, there are 7 million low-income people in the United Kingdom who are not on the electoral register and don't get to vote. So I think perhaps we should fix that before we worry about the other.
OK, thank you very much. We have to move on there. Thank you very much, Shan Simon and Chris Hope. Excellent story. Thank you very much.